Mary Omne. The two samples were then DNA tested. The results showed that these two individuals did not share the same mother. From this, the film concludes that these two individuals must be husband and wife.
It was concluded that these people must have been married. This is a huge jump in logic.
Dr. Carney Matheson, the scientist who performed the DNA test, is quoted as having told the Discovery Channel, "There is a statement in the film that has been taken out of context. While marriage is a possibility, other relationships like father and daughter, paternal cousins, sister-in-law, or indeed two unrelated individuals are also possible. My conclusion is that they are not maternally related. You cannot genetically test for marriage."
The testing of DNA is a good test, but when we enter into the forensic conclusion arena, that's where this movie fails, and fails miserably.
And so perhaps Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married, as the DNA results from the Talpiot ossuaries suggest.
To conclude that these two people were husband and wife in this documentary is preposterous.
No writings throughout history until recent filmmakers has there ever been anyone who has stood up to say that Jesus was married. That's not within the realm of Christian historiographers, nor in the realm of those who are pagan antagonists of Christianity has it ever been implied that Jesus was married.
It would be inconceivable, I think, that if Jesus of Nazareth had left behind a widow in the early church, that there would be no mention anywhere in any of the documents of such a person.
When I was invited to be involved with the documentary, it was not a direction to identify anyone at that point or to make a relationship between a Jesus and a Mary. And I think these are terrible things to try and convince or dupe an audience into believing that are not substantiated by any form or fact whatsoever.
Another example of this involves the most famous brother of Jesus of Nazareth, James. An ossuary appeared on the antiquities market some time ago that bears the controversial inscription, James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. The Lost Tomb of Jesus filmmakers begin their desperate attempt to get this ossuary connected to the Talpiot tomb by emphasizing that one of the 10 ossuaries recorded by Dr. Gibson is missing.
Somehow, somewhere, one of the Talpiot ossuaries went missing. And it is with this missing ossuary that a new mystery begins. Perhaps the ossuary was stolen. Maybe a worker at the site in 1980 had light fingers.
Professionally, I'm insulted. Believe me, we are doing our best way to document all the findings in the right way they appeared. And the 10th ossuary was a plain one. But to blame us that we have smuggled or didn't pay attention or allowed to steal it, that's a real blame, and I will not accept it.
Yet, the original excavators, Dr. Kloner and Dr. Gibson, both told us that the 10th ossuary from the Talpiot tomb was broken, undecorated, and uninscribed, and therefore recorded but not stored in the main antiquities warehouse.
The 10th ossuary, being plain one, it was left with many other undecorated and uninscribed ossuaries in the courtyards.
The filmmakers and writers on this subject then claimed that this missing ossuary must have been the James ossuary, but the evidence clearly contradicts this claim.
It will be an enormous leap to go from a broken, uninscribed and undecorated 10th ossuary from the Talpiot tomb to that of the James ossuary, which is complete, decorated and inscribed. So I don't think there's any connection between the two. I think it's a bit of a nonsense, but there you are.
There is no way that we can actually connect the James ossuary with that tomb, and the evidence should just end right there. All we had to do was scratch the surface. We found so many errors and so many manipulations that the lost tomb of Jesus ends up falling into the realm of what one would consider to be a hoax.
Let's look at an example of such a manipulation. In the clip you are about to see, the filmmakers try to convince their audience that this symbol on the entrance to the Talpiot tomb is an early symbol of the followers of Jesus, by matching it with these scratch marks on an ossuary in another tomb.
You're not gonna believe it. I'm imagining it. Can you see?
Now I see.
It's a symbol from the tomb, on an ossuary.
This is incredible because the angle and the thing is identical.
It's identical.
And the dot inside.
The dot is deliberately inside. The inverted V with the dot in the middle, the symbol from our tomb, right on the ossuary.
Dot. There's dots all over the surface. So that dot is just a dot.
The followers of Jesus.
The other thing is that chevron, the sort of upper triangle, is also on the lid. He doesn't show the lid.
Directly connects into what is.
This is the same ossuary that was used to make this point in the Lost Tomb of Jesus documentary. In the Lost Tomb of Jesus, they're trying to convince the viewer that this is an early Christian symbol. The lid to this bone box or this ossuary is removed for the documentary, but when we put the lid that's next to it on, then we see very clearly that this is a mason's mark. There's a mason's mark on the box itself. There's a mason's mark on the stone lid to show how that lid is to fit onto the ossuary.
Now, what does this mean? Why wasn't the lid there for the shooting? It was there for years. In this case, during the shooting, somehow the lid disappeared. Was it not necessary? Was it in the way? Was it perhaps going to lead some people to believe that this was simply a mark made by the masons, stonemasons, and certainly not by followers of Jesus? Here again, you can see which direction to put the lid. This is one on the side of the box. You see this little cut here? It matches the one on top. And you can see here, in order to know that when you put the bones inside, with everybody standing around at that one-year ceremony, that this lid is actually going on the right direction. Because if it isn't, because it's actually cut by hand, the lid can fall down inside and break the bones. But you can see here that they've made this little chisel or a scratch zigzag up on the top to match the zigzag on the box itself, so you know which direction the lid should go on. This gets into the realm of journalism, in which if you have to modify the environment to make the case for something, it means that your case is very weak. To try to undermine science, undermine historiography, undermine religion without having their facts straight. That's obviously what happened in this case.
I am not interested in arguing with the DVD.
Okay.
Because if I will have to relate to it and also to the book, I will use impolite words.
Okay.
It's not a joke at all.
All of the scholars in the film, take each one of them, have retracted themselves from what they said earlier, or heavily modified what they said. And in most cases, they felt that they were manipulated into making certain statements and made to say something that helped to support a premise that they didn't even know lay behind the work of these filmmakers.
You can take anybody and you can edit their words so that they can be seen to be supporting something they don't necessarily believe in.
I saw the way that my interview was cut up into pieces, that bits and pieces were used to follow a pre-designed conclusion. And I was very upset with that.
I'm really irritated by the way that science was used here. I think it's horrible.
It's not based on any facts. Much of the evidence shown there and written in the book is incorrect. Simply, facts were touched, were changed. It's not, in many cases, it's not the real truth.
Even though some of the scientific challenges that the Lost Tomb of Jesus documentary presents about what was found here are new, the historical and the theological challenges have been around for 2,000 years.
The overwhelming majority agree that Jesus of Nazareth died by crucifixion under Roman authority, that he was buried by Joseph of Arimathea in a tomb, that tomb was found empty by a group of his women followers on the Sunday morning after the crucifixion, that various individuals and groups of people saw appearances of Jesus alive after his death, and that the original disciples suddenly and sincerely came to believe that God had raised Jesus from the dead. So the real debate isn't over those facts. Those are largely agreed upon. The real debate is, how do you best explain them? Is the best explanation a resurrection hypothesis or some naturalistic hypothesis?
The books and films that support the claim that the bones of Jesus have been found argue for a naturalistic hypothesis. The following clip from the Lost Tomb of Jesus is a good example of this.
If the bones of Jesus were to be found in an ossuary in Jerusalem tomorrow, and without doubt, let's say they are definitely agreed to be the bones of Jesus, would that destroy Christian faith? It certainly would not destroy my Christian faith. I leave what happens to bodies up to God.
For Crossan, there is no objective truth about the way the world is or about these religious matters. There is no objective reality to God or the resurrection or any of these spiritual interpretations. They're just subjective, imaginative, personal constructs. So, for him, it's easy to confess that if the bones of Jesus were found, it wouldn't bother his faith. Of course not, because his faith is anti-realist. It's not connected to objective reality. If you take a naturalistic approach, whereby miracles are impossible, God does not intervene in history, then of course the resurrection cannot have occurred, the ascension cannot be a physical event. Of course you will say that all of this was legendary or fictional and so forth. But then it will not be a conclusion based on the evidence.
The following clip from the Lost Tomb of Jesus presents the hypothesis that Jesus' disciples stole his body and placed it in another tomb.
It was rumored that Jesus' disciples secretly took their master's body, presumably to give him a permanent burial.
The problem with the hypothesis that the disciples secretly took Jesus' body in order to give him a permanent burial is that it's just a non-starter with respect to explaining the origin of the Christian movement. It wouldn't do anything to establish or evoke a movement founded upon belief in the resurrection of the dead man.
The fact that a group of Jesus' disciples would know that he did not really rise from the dead, that he didn't ascend into heaven bodily, to go about the Roman world of his day, of that day, and for nearly every single one of those disciples to actually suffer martyrdom for a story that they knew wasn't true, I think is sloppy historiography.
Now you might say, well, lots of people have been willing to die for a lie. Yeah, but only if they thought it was the truth. This hypothesis suggests that they knew it was false, they knew it was a lie, and yet they were willing to go to horrible, tortuous deaths for it. And that is just, I think, historically preposterous.
From this side, as a historian, I have to give a great deal of credibility to the story as it stands.
Where do you believe, archaeologically, there's the most evidence for where Jesus was buried? Do you believe the East Talpiot tomb, or the Garden tomb, or the Church of the Holy Sepulchre?
Definitely the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
I think in the end,